Hello, Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish Mother. Welcome back to my channel. I am here today on Tag Tuesday with a tag video. How appropriate, right? And this is actually a tag that I was a little intimidated to do, and I think once I get started going on this tag, you'll see why I found it a little bit intimidating. This is my Problematic Faves tag. This was originated by Heejin Starlight. I will link their channel down below. Oh, by the way, they have a very funny video on their channel about the BookTube Illuminati, so I definitely recommend checking that out. And I was tagged in this tag by Scott and Nell at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. I will link their version of this tag down below, so thank you, Scott and Nell, for tagging me, even though, as I said, I was a little intimidated by this tag. So, as probably implied by the title of the tag, it has to do with problematic authors and your thoughts about them, and it also has to do with the diversity of your own reading list and TBR and bookshelves, especially with respect to trans and or non-binary authors. So let's go. So prompt 1, are there problematic authors, transphobic, homophobic, racist, etc., that had a huge influence on your life, and how do you deal with knowing this in retrospect? So I think a work can still mean a lot to you because it was formative. Even as you acknowledge kind of the shortcomings or problematic viewpoints of the author. So some authors who have been significant to me at one point or another in time include John Keats, Thomas Hardy, Toni Morrison, and Tony Kushner. And I think all of these people had or hold, in the case of Tony Kushner, views that it's in some context would be considered problematic, either past or present or future, although I can't really cite specific examples that I know about with accuracy. But basically, I think everyone is going to be problematic at some point, but the real question is, did you dig your heels in and refuse to change or learn anything, or did you actually attempt to learn and do better over time? Prompt 2, are there authors on your TBR, bookshelf, etc. who you know are problematic, transphobic, racist, or homophobic, and how do you reconcile this? So there are actually books that I've read this year and rated 5 stars that have instances of what I'm going to call casual anti-Semitism. And those include The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde and Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. And if you've read those books and you just said, huh? It's because it's not like they're a driving force of the plot or even a main subplot. They really only come up maybe twice in the whole work in both cases. And I think those views of, again, what I'm calling casual anti-Semitism are in keeping with views of the aristocratic classes of the time period. And so, and you can also look at it and say, okay, well, the authors, in this case, Oscar Wilde and Tolstoy, don't condemn those views, but they also don't, again, those views are also not a driving force of the work, and the point of the work as a whole is not to, endorse anti-Semitism or racist stereotypes about Jews or anything like that. And so, for that reason, I felt like I could still kind of overlook the casual anti-Semitism. And kind of appreciate the achievements of both of these works in terms of the writing, the themes, the characterization, ways in which they're able to speak to us today, even though both of these books were written well over 100 years ago, etc., etc. So if I apply that line of thinking to authors who are considered problematic by today's standards, so still living authors, so for example J.K. Rowling or Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I would say that if it's a book that you don't really see the ideology seeping into the work itself, that it's probably okay for you to read it, although maybe not to openly talk about it or promote it on your channel or anything like that. In the case of J.K. Rowling, I know for a fact that the books that she has written under the pen name of Robert Galbraith have problematic depictions of trans people, and so in that case, I would say, okay, just don't read those entirely. And I personally would not feel comfortable reading them, promoting them, talking about them, having them on my shelves, etc., etc. But if it's something where that particular issue of transphobia, because again, if you've been living under a rock for, several months now, both J.K. Rowling and Chimamanda Adichie have kind of come under fire for their TERF views. So, trans exclusionary radical feminist views, right, where they have said problematic things about trans women. So yeah, in those cases, so in the case of Rowling's Robert Galbraith books, I would say, yeah, definitely don't read them. Don't have them on your shelves. Don't talk about them. But if it's something like Harry Potter or Half of a Yellow Sun, I would say they're probably still okay to read. But again, I probably wouldn't necessarily draw attention to them or promote them or anything like that. I would just maybe read them privately and not share them with other people. So prompt 3, do you do specific research or check the background of authors you read or recommend, or even just mention regarding their politics? So for me, this is more a case of if I hear something about it, I will do some research, I will take note, and then I will act accordingly. So for example, I didn't know about the Chimamanda Adichie thing until I saw somebody who I'm friends with on Goodreads post a review of a story that Adichie had just published. And then it came to light that Adichie was supporting J.K. Rowling in her TERF views. So that was how I found out about that. And then I did some research. I read the interview in The Guardian, maybe, with Adichie where she talks about that, and just was kind of like, Adichie, no, why? So, for me, I'm now not gonna, I'm not gonna read any more of her books, and I'm not gonna promote her more on my channel. But yeah, so anyway, so I don't tend to actively research authors that I put on my TBR or that I, am thinking about reading or anything like that, but I think it's probably actually a good policy and one that I might try to adopt moving forward. Prompt 4, what does ethical consumption mean to you? So for me, this is almost a trick question, because I don't know that there is such a thing as ethical consumption under capitalism. Because anytime you buy something, some people are getting paid for that, and probably the people who are in charge are getting paid a lot more, while the people who are actually doing all the work are getting paid less or nothing. And certainly in countries like the United States, people who are low income earning or low wage workers are routinely denied the right to unionize or organize for higher wages, while, again, the people who are already at the very top of the wealth bracket continue to amass more and more power and more wealth. And in fact, I recently saw online this website where someone had visualized with pixels wealth inequality, and it was both very eye-opening and absolutely infuriating. And I will leave that link down in the description box below if you want to check it out, because we oftentimes have a really hard time understanding the just vast difference that there is between $1 million and $1 billion, and it's a big difference. So again, I will leave that link down below. I encourage you to check it out. But yeah, I don't know that there is anything such as ethical consumption under a capitalist system. So prompt 4, which or how many transgender and non-binary authors have you read? So in thinking about it, I'm pretty sure I've only, at least to my knowledge, read one author this year who is trans and or non-binary, and that was Dana Smith. I read their collection of poetry, Don't Call Us Dead, way back in January. I have read at least 2 other books I can think of that feature trans characters, although again, they're not, to my knowledge, written by trans or non-binary authors. So definitely that was a weak spot for me when I was going through this tag and thinking about what my answers for these prompts were going to be, because I think a lot of us like to think of ourselves as woke to some degree, but definitely this tag has given me the opportunity to reflect and to see that I'm sometimes awake but prone to napping. So prompt 6, is there a transgender and or non-binary author that you really enjoyed or would like to mention, or is there one on your TBR you're really excited about? So based on what I just said about my own sleeping on trans and non-binary authors, I'm going to commit to reading the following authors in the year 2021. And I actually look forward to reading all of these books and increasing my awareness of trans writers and their work. So one is Casey Plett. She has a collection of short stories called A Safe Girl to Love. This is as part of my Reading Women Challenge prompt to read a book by a trans author. But then in addition, I'm also going to read Akwaeke Emezi's The Death of Vivek Oji. I've never read anything by them before. And Scott and Nell at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot have just started a book club that's first scheduled to meet in February, and that is the pick for that month. So I'm excited to read that. I'm also going to read Zane Jukador's The 30 Names of Night. This is a literary fiction novel. I'm going to read another collection of Dana Smith's poetry called Homie. I believe this is their latest collection. And I'm also planning to read River Solomon's The Deep, which I've seen a lot of people on BookTube rave about. I don't know that I will get on with it because it is genre fiction, and I don't usually read fantasy or anything like that, but I'm willing to give it a go. So, and I also have another list that I've compiled with these authors and some others that who are trans or non-binary that I would like to check out. I can't commit to reading all of them in 2021, but I definitely want to commit to reading at least those 5, especially given my, basically, I've read basically almost no trans or non-binary writers in 2021. So 2020, so I want to do a better job in 2021. Prompt 7, how diverse is your bookshelf? And if you don't have a lot of books, your overall reading habits. So I think my bookshelves are fairly diverse, especially since my main areas of interest are 20th and 21st century African American and Jewish American literature. Ethnic and racial diversity is one of the areas that I tend to be kind of particularly conscious of, both in my personal reading habits and in my teaching. So in that sense, I think my bookshelves are fairly diverse. But then that leads us to prompt 8, which is, do you specifically aim to read more diverse authors, especially trans and or non-binary authors? So I do aim to read more diverse authors, but I have not tended to specifically seek out trans or non-binary authors. But again, I am grateful that this tag has given me the opportunity to reflect on that and to consider seeking out more work by trans and non-binary writers. And honestly, I don't know that I think it's possible to have a diverse bookshelf in every sense of the word. So consider, for example, is your reading diverse in terms of disability? Is it diverse in terms of neurodiversity? Is it diverse in terms of political thought? So I think a lot of people have areas of diversity that they're especially drawn to or particularly passionate about. So for example, Paula at Draw Your Book is really passionate about reading from many countries around the world, and she actually not too long ago posted a video of recommendations for African writers. I will try to link that down below. Jen at Remembered Reads tends to be particularly good at drawing attention to diversity in terms of disability. Jen, the librarian, the queer lit guru, tends to read, although not exclusively, LGBT authors. And Nell at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot has, done this whole commitment to increasing the diversity of her own bookshelves over the past year, especially with respect to race, sexuality, and gender identity. And then I myself, as you know, if you've been following my channel, have committed to this project for 2021 where I read Arab American literature because that's an area that I feel like I really don't know very much about. So again, I think everyone kind of has their specific area of diversity that they're probably better about, representing than other areas, although I don't think that's an excuse to overlook the areas that you maybe have a blind spot in, or in my case have been napping on. But again, I also don't think it's possible to have a completely diverse bookshelf in every sense of that word either. So yeah, take that for what you will. And prompt 9, this is the next to last one. So prompt 9, boost some trans and non-binary and or queer booktubers or other diverse smaller booktubers. So, I want to shout out Brianna's Library. So they tend to read a lot of nonfiction, especially work by Black, Marxist, radical, revolutionary writers, and I find that really fascinating. I have not done a lot of reading in that area, although again, as you know, if you've been following my channel, I do study 20th and 21st century African American literature, so you know, the fact that I do know about some of the people that Brianna reads and talks about on their channel, but I certainly don't know about all of them. And so it's interesting for me to learn more about the socio-historical context of the writers that I read about and I teach in my classroom. So I definitely would recommend their channel. Also just recently started following Sage Reads. And they tend to read pretty diversely, both genre fiction and literary fiction, and they also read some poetry. And so yeah, I think there's probably something for just about everyone on their channel. I'm not sure how much nonfiction they read, but again, I've not been following them for very long either. Too Tight Lautrec, who does booktube videos in drag, which is super fun. And Jen the Librarian, who I've already mentioned, the queer lit guru, right, who tends to read mainly but not exclusively LGBTQ books. And then in terms of diverse, smaller booktubers, these are all under 1,000 subs. I would recommend Sandra at Pull Down the Moon. I would also recommend Cynthia at Book Whimsy, and I would definitely recommend Alba at Seriella. If you're not following Alba, what are you doing? So you should definitely follow her. And you should definitely check out all of these other people that I've mentioned. I will link all of their channels down below. And prompt 10, tag some people, especially cis allies. So I'm going to tag 2 people who I know have recently kind of voiced concern with either, you know, thinking about problematic authors that they intend to read or thinking about the diversity of their bookshelves. And those are Brian at Bookish and Kim at Middle of the Book March, but no pressure to do this tag if you don't want to. I did, like I said, find it kind of an intimidating tag, but I felt like it was important to do for that reason. And I also wanted to do it here at the end of the year because as everyone's thinking about their 2021 reading, I thought it would be useful to kind of put out there, hey, if you haven't been reading trans and non-binary authors, like I haven't been, maybe that's an area you would want to consider increasing your knowledge of in 2021. So yeah, anyway, so again, thank you to Scott and Nell for tagging me in this, and thank you to Heejun Starlight for creating this tag to make us all more aware of trans and non-binary writers and booktubers. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you're all staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading. And until next time, would it kill you to call you mother?